Captain Elias Rourke sat quietly inside a cold metal cage. His arms were tied behind his back, and his face was bruised from the fight. The alien guards, tall and silver-skinned with sharp eyes, stood in silence around him. Their weapons were pointed at his head. But Elias didn't look afraid. He stared straight ahead. They had taken him far from Earth. He didn't know the name of the planet. All he knew was that it belonged to the Athari supremacy, the alien empire that had beaten humanity in war. Most humans were now prisoners or hiding underground. Elias was one of the last human soldiers left in the field. Now, even he had been caught. The metal doors opened with a loud hiss. The guards pulled him to his feet and dragged him down a long hallway. Strange blue lights blinked along the walls. The air smelled like burning metal and sweet gas. Elias didn't ask where they were taking him. He already knew. They were bringing him to her, Empress Kael'Vara, leader of the Athari, the one who gave the order to burn Earth's colonies, the one who ruled with no kindness. Her name alone made soldiers freeze. The guards pushed open the final door. Inside was a large throne room made of black crystal and silver. A high ceiling rose above them like a dome. At the center sat the Empress. She wore armor made of light and metal. Her face was smooth and pale, but her eyes, those eyes burned like purple fire. They locked on Elias the moment he entered. She stood slowly. Her voice echoed across the chamber. "So, this is the human ghost they speak of." Elias said nothing. His lips were dry, but his pride was still strong. "You broke into 5 military bases," she continued, stepping down from her throne. "You destroyed my fleet's supply lines. You even managed to steal one of our war codes." Elias stayed silent. Kael'Vara stopped just inches from his face. Her guards watched carefully. One move from Elias, and they would shoot, but Elias did not move. "You are either brave," Kael'Vara said, her voice low, "or foolish." Elias finally spoke. "You wouldn't know the difference." A few guards shifted, readying their weapons. Kael'Vara raised her hand and they stopped. "You are clever," she said, tilting her head. "Tell me, Captain Rourke, why do you fight when your world has already fallen?" Elias looked into her burning eyes. "Because falling isn't the same as giving up." There was silence in the room. Even the guards stopped breathing for a moment. Kael'Vara studied him. Her eyes narrowed. Her face, normally hard like stone, seemed confused, maybe even curious. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned away. "Do not kill him," she ordered. The guards looked at each other. One of them, Commander Vareth, stepped forward. "My Empress, the law says all captured human soldiers must be executed publicly." Kael'Vara didn't turn around. Her voice was firm. "I make the laws." "Yes, Empress," Vareth said, bowing, but his eyes were filled with doubt. She looked over her shoulder. "Take him to the tower. No one else is to speak with him unless I give permission." Elias raised an eyebrow. He had expected torture or death. This was something else. 2 guards grabbed him again. As they pulled him out of the throne room, Elias caught one last look at Kael'Vara. She was watching him, but not with hate. Her eyes still burned with fire, but now it was a different kind of flame. Later that night, whispers spread through the palace. Why did she spare the human? Is he special? Is she losing her mind? Commander Vareth sat alone in his quarters, his mind racing. He had served the Empress for 20 years. He had seen her burn cities, crush rebellions, and execute traitors without blinking. But today, something was different. He thought about the way she looked at the human. Not with anger, not even with fear. With interest. Why? Who was this human? And what had he done to make the Empress, known across the stars as the Flame of Judgment, change? Her orders? Meanwhile, in the tower, Elias sat in a small but clean cell. A soft light glowed above his head. Food and water had been placed on a tray beside him. He touched his sore jaw and smiled to himself. "I don't know what game you're playing, Empress," he whispered, "but I've got time to figure it out." Far above the tower, in the tallest room of the palace, Kelvara stood alone, staring out a window at the stars. Her hands were clasped behind her back. Her mind replayed the moment she looked into Elias's eyes. There was something there, something ancient, something human. And for the first time in many years, she didn't feel certain about what she was supposed to do next. Elias Rourke sat on the cold stone bench in his cell. The walls were made of smooth silver metal, and the air was always cool. A small round window showed the orange sky of the alien world. He didn't know how many days had passed. No one spoke to him. No one answered his questions. He waited. Each morning, guards came to bring food, silent, cold-faced. Their armor shone like ice. But one day, something changed. The door opened with a soft hum, and this time it wasn't a guard who entered. It was her Empress Kelvara. She walked in without fear, without guards. Her long black coat moved like shadows. Her violet eyes locked onto Elias as if she could read his soul. He stood up slowly. "Didn't think you'd come down here yourself." Kelvara said nothing at first. She looked around the room, then back at him. "You are not like the others," she said finally. Elias gave a small laugh. "I hear that a lot." She took a step closer. "I have seen humans cry, scream, and beg, but you look at me like I'm just another soldier. Why?" Elias leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Because that's all you are, a ruler with a title. Doesn't make you a god." Kelvara raised an eyebrow. "And yet you are the prisoner, not me." "True," Elias said. "But being free in my mind is more powerful than your throne." For a second, she said nothing. Then she looked at him more closely. "Your mind?" "Yes. That's what I came for." Before Elias could react, Kelvara raised her hand. A soft blue light formed in her palm. She touched his forehead gently. His eyes widened. Suddenly she saw it. Not words, not thoughts, but memories. She saw Earth, green and blue. Cities full of music, art, laughter. She saw Elias as a child, running with his sister through a field of yellow flowers. He was smiling. So innocent, so human. She saw war, flames and falling buildings, soldiers dying, friends lost, his face turning harder with every battle. But under all the pain, she felt something strange. Hope. Kelvara pulled back quickly. Her face showed shock, just for a moment. Elias took a deep breath and wiped his forehead. "Don't dig too deep, Empress. You might not like what you find." But Kelvara wasn't angry. She looked unsure. "I have seen hundreds of minds," she said quietly. "Most are full of fear. Yours is full of resistance." "It's called willpower," Elias said. "You don't scare me." Kelvara stepped back, watching him closely. "You are dangerous, human. Not because of your weapons, but because of what you believe." Elias looked her in the eyes. "And maybe that's why your empire fears us." Kelvara turned and walked toward the door. "I will return." Hours later, her guards whispered again. She visited him, alone. Why? Why is she interested in a human? Commander Vareth paced back and forth in his private quarters. He had served Kelvara longer than anyone else. He had seen her destroy cities with a gesture. She never showed weakness, but now she was acting strange. He decided to speak with her. The next day, Kelvara returned to the cell. Elias was waiting. "You came back," he said. Curious about us? Kelvara stood near the wall, hands behind her back. I do not understand. You? Good, Elias said. That means I'm doing my job. She gave him a sharp look but didn't argue. Why do humans fight even when the war is lost? Because the war isn't over until we say it is. Kelvara studied him. Your people are not strong like us. Not fast, not gifted with power. And yet, you continue to resist. Elias nodded. Because we have something you don't. What? He pointed to his chest. Heart. Kelvara frowned. Emotion is weakness. No, Elias replied. It's what makes us human. It's what lets us forgive, build, change. Kelvara was silent. Elias took a step closer. You've seen it. You saw my memories. You know what I'm saying is true. Kelvara's voice was soft now. I saw your sister. Elias looked down. For a moment, his strong face broke. She believed in peace. You killed her. I didn't give the order for that raid, Kelvara said, but it was done in my name. And for that, I am responsible. Those words hit Elias harder than any weapon. An alien empress had just admitted something close to guilt. He stared at her, confused. Why are you telling me this? Kelvara turned toward the door. Because something in your mind, it changed me. She walked out, leaving Elias alone with his thoughts. That night, Kelvara stood alone in her star chamber. The sky above her showed thousands of stars, many of them conquered worlds. She used to feel proud. Now she felt hollow. Elias's memories had shaken something inside her. For the first time, she saw humans not as enemies, but as mirrors. The next morning, she canceled her next war meeting. Her guards noticed. Vareth spoke quietly to his second-in-command. Something is happening. I don't know what. But it started the moment she met that human. In his cell, Elias sat on his bed, staring at the door. The Empress had looked into his mind, but now he had looked into hers, and deep down, past all her power and pride, he saw something human. Maybe, just maybe, this war could end differently. Elias Rourke sat by the window of his cell, watching the alien sun rise. The sky was orange with two small moons fading in the distance. His world had changed. He was still a prisoner, but something was different now. The Empress had returned many times. They had talked, they had argued, but the way she looked at him now, it wasn't with hate. It was with questions. And Elias knew something important. She was starting to doubt her empire. Inside the great palace, Empress Kelvara stood in the middle of a round room with glowing walls. Around her were holograms of her advisors, powerful Aetheri lords and generals. They all looked worried. The human colonies on the edges are rising again, one general said. If we don't act fast, they'll spread rebellion, another spoke sharply. We must destroy Earth, end the humans completely before they infect other worlds. Kelvara stayed silent. Her eyes narrowed. Your orders, Empress? The first asked. She looked at the floor, thinking of Elias. His memories, his words, his heart. Finally, she said, delay the attack. All the voices in the room froze. One advisor leaned forward. Empress, that is dangerous. Kelvara spoke clearly. I said delay it. The room went dark as the holograms vanished. Alone, Kelvara stood still, her hands tight at her sides. She had just gone against everything her empire expected, and she knew her guards were watching. Commander Vareth stood outside her chamber. He had heard the conversation. He didn't speak, but his face showed his confusion. He turned to his officers and said quietly, the Empress is changing. The others looked at each other with nervous eyes. Later, Kelvara entered the tower again. Elias looked up from his seat. Back already? I've made a decision, she said. Let me guess. You're going to pretend to help Earth, then. Strike harder later, he said with a smirk. She shook her head. I stopped the order to attack Earth. Elias stood. You... What? I said no. The attack will not happen. For now. Elias stared at her. Why would you do that? She walked slowly around the room. Because I'm not sure anymore. I was raised to believe humans were dangerous, that your kind spreads chaos. But I've seen your memories. Your people create, you love. You fight not for power, but for freedom. Elias's voice was soft. And that scared you, didn't it? She turned to face him. Yes, because we were told your kind was weak, but it is we who fear change, not you. There was silence between them. Then Elias spoke. Kael'vara, you can stop this war. You can choose a different path. Her eyes burned with inner fire. But now that fire looked different. Less like rage, more like pain. That night, Elias sat in his cell thinking about his sister. He remembered her soft voice, her smile, and her final message before she died in the first wave of attacks. She had said, "Don't hate them, they're just afraid." And now Elias was beginning to understand what she meant. In the halls of the palace, Kael'vara's actions caused more whispers. The Empress paused the Earth attack. She spends hours with the human. Something is wrong. Some guards began to ask quiet questions. Others grew more loyal, defending her decisions. The Empire's heart began to shift, ever so slightly. The next day, Kael'vara took Elias out of his cell. 2 guards followed them as they walked through the palace. Tunnels. At first, Elias thought it was a trap, but soon they entered a place deep underground, a hidden research facility. The walls were dark, the lights flickered. Strange machines filled the rooms. Elias's face changed. What is this place? Kael'vara looked ahead. A lab, a place where we studied your kind. They entered a large room. Inside were cages. Human prisoners sat inside, weak and silent. Elias's fists tightened. You did this? Kael'vara's voice was cold. They did this. Scientists, generals, not under my direct orders. But under your rule, Elias said, staring at her. She didn't look away. Yes, and that is why I brought you here. He looked at her, unsure. Why? To end it. She walked to the control panel. Her fingers moved fast. Doors opened. Cages unlocked. Humans looked around, shocked and afraid. Elias ran forward. You're free. Don't run. You're safe. One woman stepped forward. Who are you? He smiled. Just a human, trying to help. Kael'vara watched quietly as Elias comforted the prisoners. One of her guards whispered to the other, This is not the Empress I knew. Back in the palace, Kael'vara stood at the window of her chamber. Commander Vareth entered. He bowed, but his voice was firm. Empress, the soldiers are confused. They don't understand your decisions. Kael'vara turned. Do you understand them, Vareth? He paused, then spoke carefully. I see change. I see mercy. I do not understand, but I see. She stepped toward him. You've served me for many years. Do you trust me? He nodded. Always. Then protect me, because many will not. In the shadows of the Empire, Kael'vara's enemies began to move. Some wanted to remove her. Some wanted the war to continue. But in a cell that was no longer locked, Elias stood by the window, feeling the first warmth of hope. The Empress was still a mystery, still dangerous. But inside her, something had changed, and that change had begun with one human memory. The wind was strong on the high tower of the Athari Palace. The sun was red now, slowly setting behind the sharp black mountains. Elias Rourke stood quietly by the edge of the balcony. His wrists were no longer chained. His cell was no longer locked. He was still a prisoner. But something had changed. The Empress had changed. Behind him, the door opened. He turned. Kyelvara entered, wearing a long cloak of silver and black. Her face looked calm, but her eyes were deep with thought. "You enjoy the view?" she asked softly. Elias gave a small smile. "It's strange. This world tried to kill me, but the sky still looks beautiful." Kyelvara joined him at the edge. "That sky has seen many wars, many lies. And maybe," Elias said, "it's ready to see something different." Kyelvara turned to him. "I want to show you something." They walked together through quiet halls, down deep stairs, past guarded doors. They reached an area few had ever seen. The room, inside, was cold and wide. Machines glowed along the walls. Kyelvara entered a code and a hidden door opened. Elias followed. Inside was a war table, full of moving lights and maps. "This," she said, "is the center of the Athari War Command." Elias looked around. "Why are you showing me this?" Kyelvara stared at the table. "Because I need you to help me stop what's coming." The map zoomed in on Earth. Red markers blinked across it, each one a planned attack. "Despite my orders," she said, "a faction within the Empire still wants to destroy Earth." Elias's fists clenched. "You're the Empress. Can't you stop them?" Kyelvara looked at him. "I've stopped some attacks, but not all. They've gone quiet, secret. Even I don't know how far their plans have gone." Elias paced slowly. "You're telling me your own people are working against you?" She nodded. "Yes. They believe I am weak, that I've lost control, that I've been changed by a human." Elias turned to her. "Have you?" Kyelvara didn't answer at first. Then she whispered, "Yes, but I don't see it as weakness." Elias looked at the table again. "What do you want me to do?" She took a breath. "I want you to speak. To the council." He stared at her. "You want me to speak to the leaders of the Empire?" She nodded. "Yes. If they hear your voice, your truth, they might begin to question everything, just like I did." Elias shook his head. "They'll never listen." "They will," she said, "if I make them." The next day, the Empress announced a private meeting of the High Council. It had not happened in years. The palace guards wore full armor. Soldiers lined the halls. Whispers filled the air. "Why is the Empress acting like this? She's bringing a human into the council? Has she lost her mind?" Commander Vareth stood at the chamber doors, watching it all. His eyes were sharp, but his heart was heavy. Inside the council room, great leaders of the Athari sat in a circle of black stone chairs. Each wore the mark of a different star system. Their faces were old, proud, and full of questions. Kyelvara entered, her cloak flowing behind her. Behind her walked Elias Rourke. Gasps filled the room. Some council members stood up in shock. "A human? Here? This is madness." Kyelvara raised her hand. "Silence." The room went quiet. She stood in the center. "This war has gone on long enough. Today I present a voice you have never heard, a voice from the people we fight." She stepped back. Elias stepped forward. He looked at the faces around him. Alien, proud, cold, but not beyond reason. He spoke. "I don't ask for your love. I don't even ask for your mercy. I ask for one thing only: understanding." He told them about Earth, about families hiding underground, about cities that once sang with life, now turned to ash. He spoke of hope, not hate. He told them about his sister. "She believed peace was possible," Elias said, voice steady, "even when your ships filled the sky." The room was silent. No species owns the Stars, he continued. Not yours, not mine. The stars belong to those who protect life, not destroy it. One elder leaned forward. Why should we believe you? Kalvara spoke from behind. Because I do. The room turned to her. I looked into his mind, she said. I saw the truth. I saw Earth through human eyes. She paused, and it changed me. Outside the chamber, the guards waited, tense. Commander Vareth stood still, hands on his sword. His second-in-command whispered, Will the council accept this? Vareth didn't answer, but in his heart, he felt something shift. Inside, one council member stood. If you are right, Empress, if humans are more than what we believed, then we must ask, what else have we misunderstood? Kalvara nodded. That is the first question of peace. The meeting ended in silence, but also in thought. No decisions were made yet, but something had started. As Elias left the chamber with Kalvara beside him, the guards outside didn't look at him like a prisoner anymore. Some even stepped aside with quiet respect. That night, Kalvara stood by her window again. Elias stood beside her. You did well, she said. I said the truth, Elias replied. That's all I can do. She looked up at the stars. They listened, more than I expected. Elias smiled slightly. Maybe your empire isn't as blind as you think. Kalvara turned to him. If this works, you may be remembered as the human who changed everything. Elias looked at her. Not alone. Far in the distance, on hidden channels, angry voices began to rise. You see what she's doing? She is no longer fit to rule. She must be stopped. The shadows were moving, but so was hope. The great hall was full of tension. The air was heavy and thick, like a storm waiting to break. The High Council had gathered again, this time in public. The walls were dark stone, carved with symbols of power and victory. The Empress Kalvara sat at the head of the circle, her eyes glowing softly with a strange fire. Beside her stood Elias Rourke, no longer a prisoner but a guest, though still watched carefully by the guards. He was ready to speak again. The council members murmured among themselves, anger and doubt mixing in their voices. One of the oldest councilors, Lord Thalrek, rose. His skin was a deep blue, and his face was lined with years of battle. Empress, why have you brought this human before us? What right does he have to speak to the rulers of the Athari? Kalvara's voice was steady and clear. Because he speaks the truth. Elias stepped forward. I stand here not as an enemy, but as proof of what humanity can be. We are not destroyers. We are survivors. We fight because we believe in freedom, in hope. The council laughed, some openly. One councilor spat on the floor. Hope? You speak of hope after your worlds lie in ashes? Your people are weak. Your rebellion is nothing but a dying spark. Elias's eyes did not waver. That spark can become a flame. Kalvara raised her hand. Enough, she turned to the council. You accuse me of weakness because I question the war. But I have seen the cost. I have seen the pain on both sides. This endless fight will destroy us all. The chamber grew quiet. Lord Thalrek's voice was cold. You threaten the Empire's strength. You would bring ruin by sparing our enemies. Kalvara met his gaze. I bring peace. Another counselor, a young woman named Lyria, spoke. The Empress's mercy is a sign of hope. Perhaps we need to rethink our ways. The room was divided. Some nodded, others scowled. The Empress looked at each face, her power clear in the silence. Outside the chamber, Commander Vareth waited. His heart pounded with uncertainty. He had been ordered to arrest Kalvara if she defied the council, but now he hesitated. The guards whispered among themselves, some loyal to the old ways, others questioning their own beliefs. Vareth knew that whatever happened inside would change everything. Inside, Elias spoke again. War is not the answer. We must find a new path, one where humans and Etheri can live without fear. A murmur spread. One elder asked, "What do you suggest?" "Talk. Understanding. Trust," Elias said simply. Kelvara nodded. "I have already begun. I will work for peace." Some council members looked hopeful. Others looked ready to fight. Suddenly, the doors burst open. A group of armed soldiers entered, led by a tall man with cold eyes. "By order of the High Council, I arrest Empress Kael'vara for treason." The room exploded with chaos. Kael'vara stood tall. "You will not take me." Commander Vareth stepped forward, sword drawn. "I serve the Empress, not those who seek to destroy her." The soldiers hesitated. Some lowered their weapons. Vareth turned to the guards. "Who stands with me?" Slowly, many guards stepped forward, their weapons lowered. Elias looked at the scene, amazed. He had seen many battles, but never a moment like this, where loyalty was tested and hearts could change. Kelvara spoke to the council. "This empire will not fall to fear or hatred. We will rebuild with compassion and strength." Lord Thalrek glared but said nothing. Outside the palace, people watched and waited. Rumors spread quickly. "The Empress fights for peace. Humans and Etheri, working together? Is the war over?" No one knew the answer, but hope was growing. Later, Kael'vara and Elias stood in the garden of the palace under the stars. "You changed everything," Elias said softly. "No," Kael'vara replied. "You changed me. Your fury burned bright, not to destroy, but to save." They looked at each other, knowing the road ahead was hard but no longer impossible. The morning sun cast a warm glow over the imperial courtyard. Guards in shining armor stood at attention, but their faces looked different. The usual hard, unreadable expressions had softened. Some exchanged quiet words, others simply watched. The horizon, lost in thought. Commander Vareth stood near the main gate, his gaze steady but filled with questions. He had spent years guarding Empress Kael'vara, enforcing her orders without hesitation, but those days seemed far away now. His eyes shifted to the Empress herself. She walked calmly through the courtyard, her violet eyes still glowing softly, but now with something new, hope. Beside her walked Elias Rourke, no longer a prisoner but a trusted guest. His shoulders relaxed, and he moved with the confidence of a man who had found allies in the most unlikely place. The courtyard had been a place of war and judgment, but today it was different. Kael'vara stopped and looked around at her guards. "I know many of you doubt me." A murmur ran through the crowd. "But today, I ask you to see not just an empress, but a leader who wishes for peace." Commander Vareth stepped forward. "Your guards have followed you through battles and storms. We are loyal. But loyalty is not blindness. We have questions about the war, about humanity, about what comes next." Kael'vara smiled gently. "Questions are the beginning of understanding." Elias watched quietly. He felt the weight of history in that moment. This was not just a palace courtyard. It was the crossroads of two worlds. He spoke softly, but his words carried. "I was once your enemy. Now, I am your hope. Not because I am better, but because we all chose to change." The guards looked at him, some nodding slowly. The walls that had held hatred were cracking. That evening, Kael'vara and Elias walked through the palace gardens. The air was cool, filled with the scent of strange alien flowers. The stars above shone bright and clear. Kael'vara stopped by a small fountain. Your people teach that the heart can change everything. Elias smiled. It's true, the heart is stronger than any weapon. She looked at him with her burning eyes. Your fury burned with fire, but instead of destruction, you used it to inspire. He nodded. Because that's what humans do. We fight for what we believe in, but we also forgive. Kelvara's face softened. Perhaps that is the power I was missing. Days passed. The empire began to change. Orders were given to halt attacks. Prisoners were freed. Talks began between former enemies. Kelvara's guards, once strict and fearful, now spoke openly. They shared stories of their own doubts and hopes. Commander Vareth became a voice for change among them. The empire was far from perfect. There were those who still wished for war. But the path of peace had begun. One night, as the palace slept, Kelvara stood alone on her balcony. She looked at the stars, thinking of Earth, of Elias, of the future. A soft voice came behind her. You have changed everything. She turned to see Elias smiling. No, you did. Your strength gave me hope. She reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. Together, we can build a new empire. One where all beings are free. Nodded. Together. The guards watched from below. Their hearts were full of questions, but also of faith. They had seen the Empress's fury. They had seen what she did to Elias, and now they questioned everything they thought they knew.